So Dusty, Steve, as we move closer and closer to the implementation of the revenue recognition standard, what are some things you're seeing out of the market?
Well, it's definitely been active. There are those companies that started earlier on. They're still ongoing. A lot of the companies that started early knew they had a lot of work to do, but there's certainly been a resurgence of late where companies that are perhaps behind where they want to be, realizing that they've got a lot of work to do before we get to the end of the year. We're certainly seeing more interest from the regulators as well as we get closer and closer to implementation, with requests for more information to be provided by companies in terms of where they are in their process, what they believe is going to change, and so forth. So interest across the market, including the regulators.
And what are the biggest surprises you're seeing?
I think the biggest surprise that I've seen is that it takes longer than companies think just to get through that initial assessment. That assessment takes a while. We're talking easily 6 to 8 weeks, but then if there are competing priorities, it can go longer than that. So you have to get through that to even figure out what you need to fix when the time comes from a data perspective. So companies understanding that it takes longer is one surprise that we saw, and then companies finding that they're more affected than they thought they would be.
Yeah, there's certainly, I think there's a lot of companies that are struggling through the assessment, but what they don't realize, if they are impacted, that we're going to see a much bigger effort related, especially when we're looking at revenue automation, to put in place a revenue subledger to help with the adoption of the new standard. There's a significant amount of work that needs to occur post-assessment that we've been helping clients address.
Dusty, it's fair to say some sectors, companies are hit harder by the standard than others. Are there any companies that don't have to do anything?
No. There are companies out there who probably believe they don't have to do anything, but the problem is if you assert that this standard has no effect on me, you've got to do a certain amount of work to prove that that's the case. So all companies, no matter what industry they're in, unless you have just the very simplest, I sell one thing, I never give a discount, I never have commissions, I never have anything, then you're going to need to do an assessment to prove out your assertion that you're not going to be affected very much, or, as we found in a lot of cases, actually your assertion might not have been correct. There was more there than what you thought, and a lot of that comes through looking at contracts. A lot of that comes to talking to other folks within the business who understand the things that go on outside of contracts. So it really is important that even if you believe that there's going to be no change, go ahead, get started with that impact assessment so that you can validate whether or not that's the case.